You were asked to provide evidence. You said you were very confident there was something from the first century, but now you have done your homework.
No, that's not what I said. What I did say is that I did read an article which confirmed there was something from the first century. I have followed that up, and now they're saying in this article, follow up the article, it says that they can't be 100% certain that it is from the first century. So I'm being honest, based on my more recent discovery of an article following that up.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't whether it was maybe or maybe not from the first century. It has been confirmed that what Dan Wallace claimed was from the first century has been refuted as not being from the first century.
Okay, that's possible.
No, not possible. It's already confirmed
I'm just saying, from my perspective.
By the way, these are Christian scholars who have confirmed this. Okay, so you have nothing from the first century. What have you got from the second century?
I think there's at least 3 or 4. I don't know.
So again, you're back to square one. You still don't know what's from the second century either.
My memory doesn't recall what's from the second century.
Do you know any Christian who recalls this from the park? Maybe you can bring them here, we can discuss. Bring Atulia if you want, because if you can provide evidence of a first century or a second century manuscripts, because there's something called the P52, and that was actually from they said either end of second century or the beginning of the third century. So you're looking at the border of the second or the third century. Yes, and that is still very late. My question would be, if it was that late, 100, 200 years after Jesus, yes, how would you know what Jesus actually said? I mean, we don't, like you said, your memory lapses, yeah? If you don't remember something within, sometimes on the same day, or within the previous week, or even the previous year, how will you remember something over a period of 200 years with 0 manuscripts, without the oral tradition like the way the Muslims have, you know, where we memorize it by thousands of people? Yes, you have neither of these two ways of preservation. So what have you got? Nothing. How would you know what Jesus actually said 200 years ago?
Well, we do know that we have got tradition of the community at the time.
What community?
Which is the Jewish community.
Yeah,
and then we also have the Christian community after Jesus' death, which is where the development of disciples during Jesus' life as well.
No, having a community, how does that preserve without these two modes of preservation, either a manuscript or using memorization?
With those people, there will be an understanding of what was said and what was written.
What do you mean understanding? I don't understand.
Yeah.
Imagine someone said something, yes? How will you quote that person if you don't have any source? If you don't have a written source or someone memorizing
it? Through the generations,
yeah.
If scripture, don't forget, we only are basing this on what we've discovered. That doesn't mean there was a first century, there was a second century, it's just that we haven't uncovered it.
But that's an argument from silence.
No, I'm just
it's a fallacy.
I'm just telling you the situation we're in. But that doesn't mean that during that time there wasn't written documents. And what I'm saying is this, is that during the first and second century, of the Christian communities that existed back then, if there was anything that came out that we have seen, where we've got discrepancies in core teachings, we would see some kind of response that would have been documented around the second, third century, making those claims and say, no, this is not what our generation, the community before us teach.
No, I'm not saying there was no written documentation. I'm not saying they were not written down. Yes, my argument is this, that even if it was written down, you have nothing preserved. So for you to fall back on anything from that first and second century, there is no scope unless and until you find some evidence from those centuries. I'll let you speak, allow me to finish. Now, you're saying there was a society and they might have written it down and there was no disagreements. I completely disagree with that, because you had the Arianisms and you had the Athanasian Creed and so on, and these people, the early Christians, were actually having a lot of debates and disagreements with each other. That's the reason for this Nicene Creed, where they actually got rid of the disagreements and they stuck to one narrative, that of Athanasius, and they rejected Arian's narrative, even though there was even though both of them used to be basically the head of the church at that time. Maybe for a little while it was Arius, for a little while it was Athanasius, and so on. So I'm not saying there was no disagreements. I'm not saying there was no written documentation. The question here is, Ray, for you to answer is this: how will you, as a person in the 21st century, confirm what Jesus actually preached without any evidence either of a manuscript or a testimony which is reliable.
Because what happened is based on the history that we are aware of, is the word spread. We had copies that were written around the world. We've got copies, I won't say which particular century, but certainly we have a record from the 2nd century onwards which spread where we had copies written in many lands. And when we look at the copies of those copies all around the globe, we have a very strong consistency of the core message. And when we talk about disagreements, like you said, the Athanasian Creed, Nicaea Creed, this is not
Arian and Athanasian. Yeah.
We're not talking about a dispute of the words within the manuscripts. We're talking about the interpretation of those words. What do they mean? How do we understand them as a teaching, as a belief? There was obviously still much a discussion going on in understanding that.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
But I'm not talking about that. All I'm talking about is that when we have all those copies that were around the world that were discovered, and we see that there is a very strong consistency of accuracy.
No, actually, I disagree with that. Right?
Let me finish.
Yeah, sure.
So let me finish. So my point is this, that all those copies that we have seen globally over the centuries, from the 2nd onwards, does have a consistency and agreement that if there was any case that there were very different words being spoken...
Can you actually quote any scholar who has claimed this?
We should see examples of it. So where do we see examples?
Have you heard of any scholar who makes that claim, what he just said, that there was consistency amongst the manuscripts after the 2nd century? Which scholar ever made that claim? Because I'm sure you haven't studied this particular topic. What you have just done is speculated about